to factor the last way today. I think this way is easy with factoring, but some people in fourth hour today told me that this was not fun for them. But I'm going to try to get you there. All right? So step one, could you FOIL this out if I asked you to?
Go back to vehicles and crashing.
FOIL. X times x is x squared. X times negative 2 is negative 2x. 2 times x. This is what you watched notes over that day when I wasn't here and it like kept cutting in and out. Remember that?
Oh, yeah, that's 2x, and then it's going to be
2 times negative 2 is negative 4. Notice what we started with. These were almost the same parentheses, right? Except for one was a plus and one was a minus. And look what happens. What happens to our middle terms there? They combine to give you what?
0.
Because a negative 2x and a positive 2x cancel out, and you're just left with x squared minus 4.
Yeah,
You did. We're going backwards today. Today, we're going to go from this, and you're going to go back to that.
I have a question.
All right, so I'm going to show you this first. Yes.
Can Seth hear us?
Maybe sort of. This is my microphone right here. Dylan says hi. How much you want to bet he doesn't watch it? Seth, I bet you $1 you don't watch this. And if you do watch it, come in to class when you come back and say, I love rainbows. What? And you'll get candy. And I'll give you $1 because I bet him $1. And a cool pencil.
Betty does watch it.
I bet he doesn't. Unless one of you get hold of him and tell him that. But you shouldn't.
I don't know how to
The
get
only way I could get a hold of Seth was through Xbox. I don't even know what the camera that is, so you're safe.
So we're going to factor this today, but what I wanted to show you is today you're just going to have two things. And notice, is that a perfect square? X squared is a perfect square, it's x times x. Is 4 a perfect square number?
Yeah.
Yeah, so when you see a perfect square minus a perfect square, it always factors into the same thing in both parentheses, 1 plus 1 minus. You don't have to really think about it. And we call this the difference.
And your board doesn't work.
Oh.
I like how it works right as you put the dot down.
Of 2 squares. Because it's perfect squares, and difference means subtracting.
I can write the difference of squares.
That works. So if you look on the next slide, I put a bunch of these on here. The great thing is when you see 2 perfect squares subtracted, it's going to be the same every time. Come on. Okay. So when you see x squared minus 9, is x squared a perfect square?
Yes.
Is 9 a perfect square?
Yes.
So you're going to make your 2 parentheses. And I think it's much easier than yesterday. What multiplies to give you x squared? X and x. What number times itself gives you 9? 3 times 3. And what do the signs have to be if we want a negative 9?
Negative.
Yeah, one has to be plus, one has to be minus. And it doesn't matter which one you make plus, which one you make minus. Huh? Easy?
That's all. That's it.
That's the answer. So let's look at the next one.
You're so like upbeat today.
I'm sorry?
You're upbeat today.
I'm just trying to make you happy about math.
It's okay, Dawn.
I love math.
It makes me cry.
So what about 4x squared? Can you think of a number times itself that gives you 4x squared?
Yeah, 2x.
So that goes in the first one. Oh, I almost forgot my 2. And what number times itself gives you 25? And what do your signs have to be? One has to be negative, one has to be positive.
And we done it. We done it.
Now, how can I trick you? Look at number 4 here. What multiplies to give you x squared? X and x. Is 16 a perfect square? 4 and 4, right? But here's the tricky part. There's a plus sign there instead of a minus sign.
So it's just gonna be both like the same signs.
Well, let's see what happens if we do that. If I put 4 and 4, what do you want? Do you want to put both pluses or both minuses?
Both.
Is that going to give me nothing in the middle? If I work that out, isn't that going to give me x squared plus 4x plus 4x plus 16? Do those cancel out?
Where's
Both ones.
If I make them both minuses, that's just gonna make that minus 4x and minus 4x. Is that gonna cancel out?
No, you need
Nope.
1 plus 1 minus.
Okay, so if we make 1 plus and 1 minus, that gives me 0 in the middle, but does that give me a positive 16 or a negative 16?
Negative 16, so you have to divide it by negative 1.
Can't do it. You can't just divide by negative 1.
That's not a hand.
It's prime.
How's it prime though if there's 2 squares?
Because it's not plus. Remember, what do we call it? The difference of two squares. And what does difference mean? Subtract. You have to be subtracting two square numbers. Sydney.
I don't know.
All the other ones we've been working on have 3 things in them, right? Or the GCF, right? So like, and tomorrow I'll kind of put it all together and go over all the factors again. But like, the other stuff we've been doing is like this. X squared plus 7x plus 10. One, how do you know it's not this? First of all, are these perfect squares? No. And all of these perfect squares have nothing in the middle. If you see a middle term there, you either have to just make your 2 parentheses, or you have to do what we did yesterday, where you multiply the first and the last. Okay, and tomorrow I'll kind of give you a paper to go over all the types of factoring again, to review it. But I always recognize these because there's only 2 numbers. And all the other ones we've been doing have at least 3 numbers usually, or a GCF. The other kind of special case, which again is up to you if you want to use the special case or not, is what if they are the same sign? So like this one, again, I thought I'd use this one before we factor it. But what if it's the same thing in both parentheses? The middle part's not going to cancel out, but it still is a special case. So if I FOILed this out, I would get 4x squared plus 2x plus 2x plus 1. And I could add those together. I would get 4x squared plus 4x plus 1. To factor that, I'm going to factor this first one the way we did yesterday and the new way. You can still do it the old way. You can still multiply the first and last together and see what works. But you can also do the shortcut. Is this a perfect square? Is 1 a perfect square? People think it's not, but it is, right? 1 times 1 is still 1. Right? So 1 is a perfect square. If your first and your last number are a perfect square, then most of the time you can just put those in the parentheses, and I'll show you that in a minute. We'll get to one that you don't know the answer to already. All right, and we'll factor that. So just notice that we can still do this. But let's do it the old way first, because this always works. And some people last hour said, I like the old way, I'm not doing the shortcut. If I want to factor this, do you agree what we did yesterday? We would take this times this and get 36. Oh, speaking of the old way, if you didn't turn your homework in yesterday, I need that. It's a worksheet.
I remember you
Yeah.
checked it and you said, hey, I'm good. You done good.
Yeah, a lot of people
The
do that.
basket.
I'll take it. Oh, you turned in the basket already?
So geometry this morning was hard.
What did you do in there?
We did like this, maybe you gotta do it's like bisectors and vertexes and
Fun.
midpoints and all kinds of crazy stuff, and it's not fun and it's hard and
So this is what we did yesterday. Multiply to give me 36, that adds to give me 12. Can you think of things that multiply to give you 36, that add to give you 12?
I got you right now.
6 and 6. 6 times 6 is 36. 6 plus 6 is 12, and you just put your x's there, right? Notice they're the same number. That's because this is a special case where it's the same thing. But it's okay if you don't realize that. Bring down your outside numbers. And just like we did yesterday, you're just going to group them together. And you say, what can I take out of 9x squared plus 6x? 3x. And if I divide 9 divided by 3 is 3, I take 1x out. 6 divided by 3 is 2, I took the x out.
Then on the other side, you should be left with the same
So what can I take out of 6x plus 4 to be left with the same thing?
2.
And would I be left with 3x plus 2?
So now you've got 3x plus 2. 3x plus 2.
Ah, it's the same thing, right? 3x plus 2 and 3x plus 2. But you don't have to do a shortcut to do that, right? It still works the same way. But I do want to show you a shortcut because sometimes the numbers get really big and you think, why in the world would she give me such an awful problem?
Yeah, like
Because it's a shortcut. But yesterday wasn't a shortcut. So let me go back up here and do this another way. This is how you can do it if you recognize. Is 9x squared a perfect square? Is 4 a perfect square? So what if I just make my two parentheses and I say, what multiplies to give me 9x squared? 3x and 3x. What multiplies to give me 4? 2 and 2. And I know they're not going to be opposite signs because when one's a plus and one's a minus, I get nothing in the middle, right? That's the difference. I know they're going to be the same signs. How do you know what sign to make it? Right there. If I want a plus sign in the middle, what do my signs have to be? Plus and plus. And you don't have to do any work to get that if you recognize it. Do you have to do it that way? No. Why would you maybe want to do it that way? Look at number 6 right here. What if this was a problem on your homework? You would have to start by saying 16 times 25, which is what? 400, which is not impossible to do, but it's a lot bigger number. And you'd have to say what multiplies to give me 400 that adds to give me negative 40. You could do it, but you could also say, is 16 a perfect square?
Yes.
Is 25 a perfect square?
Yes.
So what if I didn't do it this way and I just made my two parentheses?
Because that's terrible and that's not what we taught.
But this is a special case. That's why they're called special products. What multiplies to give you 16?
4x.
4x and 4x. What multiplies to give you 25?
And they're both plus because it's no. It's going to be a negative. So one's going to be positive, one's going to be negative.
No. If one's positive and one's negative, it's like what we just did where there's nothing in the middle, right? If there's something in the middle, they have to either both be positive or both be negative.
So both are negative.
Did you come up with the two numbers, Sydney? 20 and 20, right? Like it works. You can still do the numbers, right? Dylan, like you could have made this negative 20x and negative 20x. Bring down your outside numbers, and I promise it still works. I just want to show it to you because sometimes those big numbers are tricky. And sometimes on a multiple choice question, it might be easy to match it up.
That's how I do it. Just because that's the way I do it.
Okay, that's okay. That's why I'm just showing you this. Because it's a lot shorter if you recognize it.
You don't have to show it.
And you don't have to show your work because it's all in your head. And the nice thing is, if you get the same number in the middle, then these two should always be the same when you do that. How about that? Did you get it, Sydney? Okay. What else can we do with this? We could throw equations in. We haven't done that in a while, so I thought I might want to remind you of it before we have a quiz tomorrow. With these special cases, let's look at these last two, then we'll do it quicker, then I'll give you some homework. Prime time day, I forgot.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll just do the clickers by raising our hand. What does it mean to do when you have it equal to 0?
Second.
You still have to factor, but then there's that extra step. So step 1, how do you factor when it's just a perfect square minus a perfect square?
You do the thing that you just showed us.
And if there's nothing in the middle, what are your signs always going to be?
The same.
Is this what we just did? Just look at your notes that we just did. Is this the one we just did where they were the same? No. What we just did when they had the same sign, there was a middle number every time. Right? There's no middle number, which means what do your signs have to be?
Different.
If there's no middle number, that means you're subtracting to get nothing in the middle, which means they always have to be opposite signs. So I know on this, one has to be positive, one has to be negative. Every time.
And I have to have 5y.
Yeah, what gives you 25y squared? 5y and 5y. If you don't know what the square root of these numbers are, there is a square root button on your calculator. It's right above x squared on my calculators. If you don't know how to use that button, let me know. But the square root of 100 is 10. And if it just said factor it, you're done there. But I want to solve it. What's that mean? What's that extra step?
Now you're going to have to take it down and say that 5y equals negative 10 and...
Right, you set each one equal to 0. So 5y plus 10 equals 0. And 5y minus 10 equals 0.
You're going to get 5y equals negative 10 and 5y equals positive.
Right, because you're going to subtract 10 over. Then you're going to divide by 5. And instead of getting this as your answer, you actually get a number answer. Y equals too?
Yes.
So what's gonna happen on the other one? Do I need to work that one out too, or do I already know what's gonna happen?
You don't have to.
What's it gonna give you?
Positive two.
Yeah, because the only thing that's gonna change is we're gonna add 10 instead of subtract 10.
What I always do with that is I just like go ahead and divide it. So like I just put 5 by like negative 10 and then just make it a plus at the end. So it'd be easier to use.
Look at this one. This is where I think knowing that shortcut is nice because, Sydney, if you get a chance, can you take 36 times 49 for me? That's ridiculous. And if I was a student, I would say, why in the world would my teacher give me a problem that goes 1,764? But then in my head, I think she wouldn't give me such a terrible problem. This has to be one of those special cases. So it's not that you have to memorize a special case, but if you see a problem like that on your quiz tomorrow, you should think, oh, I bet it's that one where it's the same in both ones. And so then you can check. Is 36 a perfect square?
Yes.
Is 49 a perfect square? Which means you can make your two parentheses, and instead of having to guess what multiplies to give you 1,764, that adds to give you 84, you can just say, what gives you 36x squared? 6x, 6x. What multiplies to give you 49? 7 and 7, and if it's all pluses, what do I put in here? All pluses. Be aware that you could get fractions, which on this one you can. Here's the bright side about this. Since those are the same thing in both parentheses, do I need to solve that 2 times?
No.
It's the same thing, so I only have to do it 1 time. So go ahead and solve that. Don't be scared about fractions because the nice thing about a fraction is you don't even need a calculator. You just leave it as a fraction. So on this, what would I do first? Subtract 7 and then divide by 6. And a lot of times people stop because they're like, oh, it doesn't work out nice. That's it. That's your answer. Negative 7 over 6.
I just said 1 plus 6.
You don't need to. So let me start this class. Don't do anything yet because I don't remember if I started the class yet or not.
Accidentally joined this by a second.
Start class. Start class. Start class. I'm gonna do to talk me into it. Come
Why is your
on.
computer being so slow?
I don't know. I hate it. Mr. Puckett's coming to observe me on Monday, and I just know this is gonna happen.
Like during this period?
No, during first hour.
That's good.
So don't do anything yet. Actually, you can turn yours on now. I think. Oh no, wait. Now you're ready to use it. All right. Programming some.
I already turned it on.
Okay, turn it on. You should turn it on until it says to turn it on. But see if you can log in. Do you know your numbers? Do you remember your numbers?
I don't.
These are your new numbers. Have we done it since these numbers? Alright, because somehow I deleted all my other numbers and I had to start over and I started with first hour as number 1. So you guys are in the 70s now. So Sydney, you're 71. Katie, you're 72. Morgan, are you awake over there? Are you logged in?
This is so much better than I said.
Morgan, you're 73. Are we logged in yet?
73.
73. Katie, did you get logged in?
Yeah.
I know I changed your number, but you're always 73 now, from now on. So now I want you to tell me which one of these, A, B, C, or D, is factored 4x squared minus 49. Which one of those is the factored form of 4x squared minus 49?
We get out of here in 2 minutes.
No, you're not here at 33 today.
Oh yeah.
of them got it right.
What?
Good job. When there's two things, they got to be different signs. So you should be able to say it's not C right away. D and A are bad answers because 4 times 4 does not give you 4 up there, right? So B is the right answer. Good job, guys. Okay, don't look. I got to close your eyes for a minute. Everybody do like Morgan. Start this question now. Okay. Okay, now you can look. I didn't want you to see the answer because I get to hear it from last time. So do this one. Factor 16x squared minus 24x plus 9. And pick the answer. Now this is the one where there's something in the middle. Look at your notes to see how they look when there's something in the middle. I feel like you should be able to see between two choices. Work it out. Are you going to multiply the first and the last number together? Oh my goodness. Easier.
I know, right?
Is 16 times 9 144? Is that right? What? 16 times 9 is 144. Is that right? Yeah. It's 12 and 12. I'll give you the two numbers. That's your two numbers to rewrite it as. I apologize. No, you don't have to guess. I was just giving you your two numbers so that you didn't have to divide. I completely guess. Let's see if we've all answered. Oh, no, okay. I don't want to give too many hints then until we've all answered.
Alright.
Did you pick one, Dylan? Gotta pick one. So let's talk about this for a second before I tell you the right answer.
Oh,
If there's something in the middle, are they going to be the same sign or different signs?
they're gonna be the same.
So it can't be A, because A is when it's one's a minus and one's a plus.
That just cancel out.
That would just cancel out.
Kind of wrong.
So it's got to be B or C. And how do you know the right one? This sign right here tells you that they better both be negative. So let's see how this one went. Oh, nobody got it right. B gets it right. Because if that's a minus sign right there, they have to both be
It's
negative.
gonna have to be push me. Almost there. Almost
It
there.
looked like an Oreo. Like it was.
Oh dear.
Alright.
Yeah, it's like Oreo.
Let's figure out which one of these.
Or Barney.
It's going to take some of this home negative. We'll see.
I'm not taking Barney. Barney said no.
Let's do evens on the front side, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. And then let's do 12, 14, 16 on the back. So evens up through 16, that's 8 problems. All the ones that only have two things, right? Like the first one and number 6 and number 8 and number 10. Those are just like the one that we just did. So if there's only two things, it's going to have to be 1 plus 1 minus. It's just perfect square and perfect square. So let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4 of these you should be able to do in like a minute and a half. Because you just make your two parentheses, perfect square, perfect